And welcome back. We are going to go ahead and create that sprite. So in order to do so, I've grabbed my calculator here, and we set this up as a 64 by 64 graphic, which means if I look at how many frames of animation I have here, I have 6 frames of animation. So how big does my sprite sheet need to be? So in Photoshop, I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm greeted with my width and height here. Let's go ahead and grab that calculator one more time and do 64 multiplied by, if we have a 6 frames, we could easily do a 3 by 2, so I'm going to multiply that by 3 because it's 3 frames wide, which tells me I need 192 pixels for my width. And then for my height, because I need to do 2 of them, 64 times 2 gives me 128. So I've now set up my sprite sheet in terms of the size. So let's go ahead and click Create. Control 0 to move in. And I can go ahead and hide my timeline if I need to, but of course it will still be present here. So I'm not too worried about it right now. Let's go ahead and turn on our guides though. So I'm going to make a new guide layout here, just as we have done previously. And if we remember with this one, we have said we need a 3 by 2. All right. And we're not going to worry about width and height because, again, when we set up our sprites, we set them all so they are the exact same in width and height. So we don't have to worry about any unusual shapes. If we had done something differently, let's say we had done a 40 by 50, then we might have to come here and specify that width and height so it can divide it a little bit more concisely. But for our purposes, this will work perfectly because, again, we set up our sprites so that way they are square. So a 3 by 2 looks great. There's our color. We can use light red. That'll contrast nicely with our blue that we've done. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave that guide on there. And let's go ahead and go to our diamond asset. Now, we have to think about how we want to do this. So in frame 1, we have, of course, our different layers here that we have in. Now, we can, of course, untoggle the background because the background will not need to be something that we have in our sprite sheet, because remember, sprite sheets, they're typically transparent, so you're not necessarily going to have those in there. So we just need to go ahead and grab layer 1 and the other sparkle, looks like, and that's it. So if I had done these in layer groups, I can just bring over that whole layer group, but because I didn't, I have to make sure I select each individual layer, and this is going to start showing you how layer groups can be very helpful. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag these 2 individual layers over and drop them onto my sheet here, grab my move tool, and let's go ahead and get that lined in here. Now, of course, if it doesn't line up perfectly, you can, of course, use your arrow keys to kind of help move this around a little bit. And, of course, that background, of course, can be very helpful for helping make sure everything is in the proper location. So if I did drag that over with the background, let me just undo that just for a second here. And I did drag this in with the background layer on. And let's go ahead and grab those 3 layers using the control key again. And I drag that in. This is where the background actually can be very helpful because it can really help make sure that you're snapping into that grid the way you're supposed to. And then all I need to do is just untoggle that background layer for it to go away. In fact, now that I'm done with it being there, I can actually just go ahead and delete that layer because, again, we won't need it here. Now, the one thing about these 2 layers is because now I have them here, let's go ahead and put them into a layer group. And this is, of course, renamed to frame 1. So that's our first frame of our sprite sheet. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing, but let's go ahead and do that for layer 2. And when I look at this one, okay, let's again click on the background because we know that one is visible. Click on layer 2 and click on other sparkle 2. Those are the only layers visible. So again, we're going to click and drag those on over and drop them on in. And let's go ahead and get that aligned in. And we know we don't have our background, so again, let's delete that right on out. And we could just make it toggle the visibility of it, but because we know we don't need it, it's just one more piece of data that does not need to be rendered, so we're just going to go ahead and delete it. Again, select these 2 layers. Now you could merge these into one, but I like having some flexibility in case if I want to do things later, so I'm just going to go ahead and make them into a layer group and call them frame 2. Again, you can merge them into one shape here. So I could say, you know what, I want to make this merge as one solid layer. But if I say, you know, I need to just make a small tweak to something, rather than having to go through and change everything, I can just make that small tweak on those layers. All right, frame 3. Now this is where, of course, we have a little more complexity coming in. So layer 1, That's our background. Frame 1, sparkle, and other sparkle 3. We're going to drag all those over again, drop them in, and move that into place. And again, having the guides in place and the background come really handy. And let's just go ahead and delete our background. Take these 3 layers using our shift key, make them into a layer group, call it frame 3. All right, and you can start seeing how this is all coming together here. It's a pretty easy and basic step forward process. Frame 4, let's repeat. Bringing those on over. Move it into place. Delete the background layer. And put into a layer group. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause things real quick here. I want you to go ahead and finish out the rest of the sprite sheet, and I'll see you in just a second. And welcome back. We now have our sprite sheet completed, and you can see it's a very basic 6-frame sprite sheet, and our sparkles might be a little bit harder to see in some of these, which of course we could always solve by temporarily taking this layer here and just filling that in with a color. So let's just go ahead and choose something that's a nice contrast like this red. And if we just fill that in, we can see those sparkles a lot nicer here. Now, of course, typically with sprite sheets, again, we're transparent, so I'm just going to Control Z just to take that off. But this is going to wrap up our sprite sheet work here. And now we have pretty much every tool we know that we can do in order to make different icons, make different assets, different things that we can use, in whether it's an application, whether it is a video game. We have the tools, we have the fundamental skill sets underneath us before we start looking at some more advanced things that are going to really take us to that next level. So to wrap everything up here, we've created several different kind of props, several different kind of icons, several different kind of things that we can animate and put into sprite sheets. These are very valuable things for us to do. However, it is not everything that we can do with pixel art. Even with Photoshop, there's a ton of different things that we can do. And we will look at that in our next unit when we start picking apart the different ways we can take our animation skills now that we've mastered to that next level where we do things like parallax effects and character animations, etc. Specifically, the thing that we're going to be looking at next is how to take all these things that we've done with these different props, these different animations, and take them and put them all into a kind of a common repository to make something such as a pixel art map.